Hello and Happy New Year. Thank you for joining Yolanda Nava and Do You See What I See? We have a terrific guest to kick off the new year, attorney activist, and philanthropist, Antonia Hernández. Antonia has began her career many years ago. She was the head of MALDEF, Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and is now the president and CEO of the California Community Foundation. So she's had a stellar career doing a lot of good in the world. The Community Foundation champions and looks for ways to uplift and help and serve the marginalized communities. Antonia, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Yolanda, and to see you and looking wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. I recall our knowing each other and meeting each other back in the 70s. It's hard to believe it's been that long. And I want to start with that because at that time you were working with legal aid and you took it on as a lawsuit to file a suit against Los Angeles County to stop the forced sterilizations that were taking place targeting Mexican women during the 1970s. And Comisión Femenil was brought in as a plaintiff in that case and a supporter of that case. What was the significance of the outcome of that lawsuit?
Well, first of all, it was the publicity and stopping the process and making sure it didn't happen. I tell people that is a case of real importance in the freedom of choice of women. And we lost the case, so we lost the battle, but we won the war because as a consequence of the case, we were able to work with the federal government to adopt regulations that said that women cannot be approached about sterilization during labor, and there's a 72 waiting period from the time you sign to the time you actually have a sterilization. And that is the law to this day. So that case highlighted the abuses of medical professionals, of poor women who went in labor to have a child, and they ended up being sterilized. And the important thing also was the way it galvanized the community, and particularly the Latina women, because that's how I met you. That's the way I met Gloria Molina and a lot of the leaders at that time. I needed a class plaintiff, which means I needed an organization that represented Mexican American women at that time. And Comisión Femenil was a very new organization. It was the beginning of the organizing of the Latino community and Latinas beginning to get organized. So it had a galvanizing impact, not only for Latinas, because keep in mind that this case was of national and international importance. And so it was one of the first cases in which the issue of Latina women came to the surface and gave voice to the abuses that were taking place.
It was very important, and that 72-hour hold was also very important to add in there, not to twist somebody's arm when they're in the middle of a labor pain. So that was a very powerful time, and it was one of our first successes as an organization, which empowered us to do more, and we were able to do more because we just kept going after those kinds of issues to make the changes that needed to be made. You became an activist very young, and I'm intrigued because I remember your contribution to It's All in the Frijoles, to the Justice chapter, and you were talking about the fact that your father supported you, about your family history, and how your father would take you to rallies and demonstrations during the Chicano movement. Talk about that. What was his influence?
Well, my parents' influence. I am a child of my parents. And what I do and how I act is a product of their values and upbringing. My father was an extraordinarily untraditional man. Traditional in the sense that I was expected to follow all the protocols of being a woman, but untraditional in the sense that his first 4 children were girls. And we were led to believe that we could do anything with our mind, that the world was ours, and that always pursue college education. My father never went to school. He taught himself how to read and write, but it was understood since we were young that we were going to college. Now, the definition of what we could do was limited, because at that time, the 60s, the 70s, you either became a secretary, a teacher, or a nurse. And actually my first, degree is in teaching, because that was expected of a woman. And from an organizing perspective, my father was always very interested in politics. We always saw him reading La Opinión. He would go to the secondhand stores and buy National Geographics and show us pictures of the world. And he understood the whole issue of rights. I remember him taking me in LA, to the corner of, at that time, Brooklyn. And I think it was some other street where there was a Safeway, and we were demonstrating against, for the farm workers, and not buying grapes, not buying lettuce. So I've always had a very supportive family, my dad and my mom, and that didn't understand what I wanted, but supported me. And I think that that's really important. When I told him I wanted to go to law school, it was a really interesting experience, because he said to me in Spanish, "Why do you want to be a lawyer? They're a bunch of thieves."
In Mexico.
That was his view of the legal profession. I was saying, no, Daddy, in this country, there are good lawyers that can do good things. And, that was his view, but he didn't stop me. He supported me. I mean, he and my mom and my siblings, drove me to UCLA, in 1969, one of the very few Chicana Latinas at that time, to go to UCLA. So I've been very fortunate. My parents have been exceedingly proud and supportive of what I've done. And it's not just me, it's all my siblings.
It's a great story. I'm also a graduate of UCLA, and that was when the Chicano movement started there. And I was in grad school at that time. And I didn't meet you there, but I'm glad we're alma mater buddies in that regard. You've had a really strategic career. You started, you worked in Washington, D.C., and then you became the head of MALDEF, Mexican American Legal Defense Education Fund. And you've been with the California Community Foundation for now, since the 2000s, 4 or 6. And you've had a really demanding career. You've lived on an airplane much of your life. You've had a marriage, so you still have the same marriage, and you've had children. Flying back and forth. How did you manage to juggle so many balls at once?
Well, first of all, I have a very supportive husband. There's a few very strategic decisions that a person makes. And one of them is choosing your life partner. And I have an extraordinarily supportive husband. First of all, I have a very supportive family. My dad, my mom, my siblings, and then my husband. So those are two. It's interesting because people say I've had a very strategic career. The fact of the matter is, I've never had a plan.
Really?
I've never thought about, what I'm going to do next. I've been very fortunate. I started, when I went to law school, I knew I wanted to be a public interest lawyer. I didn't want to be anything else. So in that sense, it was very simple for me, because I knew I wanted to be a public interest lawyer. So right out of law school, I joined, Model Cities, which was legal aid in East LA. And then, I was approached to run at the Lincoln Heights Legal Aid Office at a very young age. And then I was approached, and this goes back to Comisión Femenil, because if you recall, in 76, Carter ran for president and won. And Gloria worked on the campaign. And so she went to Washington, Gloria Molina, the first Latina in the assembly, the first Latina in the Board of Supervisors, a trailblazer. And she went to Washington, and she kept calling me, saying, "Come to Washington. There's all these jobs." And I kept saying, no, no, no. One day she called me and she said, Ted Kennedy is looking for people for the Judiciary Committee. Well, I didn't know Washington. I didn't know the Judiciary Committee. I was a legal aid lawyer. And they came to me, they interviewed me, and they hired me. And so, did I know what counsel to the United States Senate Judiciary Committee was? No. But I think, that my upbringing, as an immigrant, is to be very comfortable with ambiguity.
Yes.
Very comfortable with nuance, with uncertainty. Somehow, we're going to make it. When we left the ranch in Mexico, to come to the United States, somehow we were going to make it. And my father and my mom and the kids and everything. So I think, the attitude of, and my husband, I will tell you, I didn't want to accept that job. But my husband said, Antonia, people would die for that opportunity. It will open the world for you that very few people, Latina, non-Latina, have. Please take the job. Okay. I mean, basically said, please take the job. And I took the job. And of course, it was transformative. I became very close to the senator, and until he died, he was one, I was a close friend of the family. I learned so much. I made so many different contacts. And then, the Democrats lost control of the Senate in 1980. And that's when Vilma from Maldiv approached me to first run the DC office, which I did for over 3 years. And the other thing that's interesting, Yolanda, is, because of my family, I was never led to believe or to think that a woman could do one thing. I was going to get married because that was the expectation. I was going to have children. But, it didn't stop me from pursuing a professional career. And I think that, what I tell women who come and talk to me and ask me that question, I said, yes, we women can have it all. We just can't have it all at the same time. Okay? We have to understand, the phases. I had 3 kids in 5 years. 2 of them in Washington, D.C., and that's when we decided we had to come home. Mm-hmm. We had to come home to Pasadena, to L.A., because I needed the support of my parents. I needed the support of my siblings in order to raise the kids. We bought a house across the street from my mom and my dad. So, understanding the support system that you need, mm-hmm. understanding that you're not going to have it all. And the fact that, when I was the head of Maldiv, you're right. I spent my life, traveling on an airplane. I needed to have the support of my husband here with the children, and with the help of my parents and help, we were able to do it. But, I didn't have very much time for friends, just because, you have to be focused. So I think, for, a woman of my time, yeah, I was a trailblazer in the sense, Latina woman, doing that, but I didn't do it alone. I had the support. And I think that makes a big difference, whether it was in the 60s or 70s or today for women.
I was fascinated by the fact that you lived in the same, block, I think, the neighborhood as your parents. And that seemed to me to be such a wise choice for you, especially with all the flying that you had to do. Let's shift gears and let's talk about the transformative times that, both of us came up through. And talk about some of the groundbreaking legislation that Maldiv was able to extract through the courts and through its advocacy roles. What are some of the key pieces of legislation or court cases that have championed Latinos, allowed Latinos to move forward in this country?
Well, Maldiv for me was the perfect vehicle for what I went to law school for. And that is that Maldiv is a vehicle to promote social change and improve the quality of life of our community. And if you think about, people don't realize the level of change because you're living the change. But let me give you some examples. We changed the political, Maldiv, through litigation, changed the political face of Latinos. If you think about, let's talk about Chicago and Gutierrez. We litigated that redistricting case and went to the Supreme Court 2 or 3 times. If you think about Bill Richardson from Nuevo Mexico, we created that district. If you think about, if you think about the face of Texas, redistricting to that. If you think about California, We litigated, the city council so that Richard Alatorre could go there. We litigated the county board of supervisors so Gloria could run and become the first Latina in the county board of supervisors. MALDEF paved the way on the political process. And young people don't realize the sacrifice and the hard work. In the field of education, Dovie Plyler, why can undocumented students now go to school and continue? It was because we litigated Dovie Plyler in a whole bunch of cases with, in fact, just this week, MALDEF filed a lawsuit against the city of Pasadena in California because they closed certain schools that impacted mostly minority kids. So the battle continues. In employment, you talk about employment. It was interesting when I came back home. I said to Joaquin, I'm leaving MALDEF. I'm going home. And he said, no. You'll have a place in LA. You can do whatever you want to. So I became the employment director of MALDEF. And we, strategically, and I think that's the important thing. MALDEF is unique in thinking strategically macro system change. So we looked at jobs and we focused on the grocery chain industry. Why? Because it was unionized, it paid well, and you didn't need a college education. And so MALDEF sued every, you think about Safeway, Vons, Kroger. We sued every national grocery chain to open opportunities for people to come in. So we did that in the employment. It's MALDEF's footprint. It's not as much acknowledged or recognized because it's been all through the legal process that we've been able to make significant advancements. And that's what I tell young people. The law is a vehicle for redressing, and it's a powerful vehicle. It's, like right now, the Supreme Court is going this way. And, strategically, we used to say, let's not go to the Supreme Court. We're not going to let's go to the state courts. It's the thinking about how are we going to achieve the equality that is written in the Constitution to apply to our community.
Oh, it's very important to do that. Let's jump forward a period of time into the 2000s. We both ended up serving on the board of La Plaza de Cultura y Arte in Los Angeles, which Gloria Molina, Supervisor Molina, championed and initiated. Why is the arts and culture important to you?
Oh, it's so critical. Culture is what binds a community together. And if your culture is not included in the largest sense of the culture, your story is not being told. Your history is not being recognized. You're not part of the fabric of, sort of the community, however you define the community. And we have such a rich culture. And so to me, whether it's visual, whether it's performance, the music, the dancing, it has to be shared. And I used to joke to people, I said, America loves our music, America loves our food, America loves our art, they just don't like us.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And for them to understand the culture and the art and what we bring, and sort of as communities, as immigrants and Native Latinos who have been here for generations, we have contributed to the culture of American society.
Tremendously. And I like to remind people that we're a $2.7 trillion economic force in this country, about to surpass the nation of France.
Exactly.
The driving power. So what is it? What's the disconnect between our presence, our contribution? We were the first line during COVID. We bring the food to the table and, pick it, grow it, ship it, deliver it, cook it, everything. What's the disconnect that we don't are not appreciated for our contributions, for the beauty of the culture, for the contributions that we make? What do we have to do?
Well, first of all, is to recognize that America and the United States, and its 240 some, years of existence, has functioned in what I call a misperceived notion of what America is and should look like. And that, the sense is that America is basically culturally an Anglo-Saxon society, disregarding the native people of this country that were here, disregarding, sort of ours and the influence of the Spaniards coming into, Mexico and etc. And it's an interesting issue, because even today, Yolanda, people say to me, "Where did you come from?"
Yeah.
And I say, "Well, LA." No. Really, where did you come from? Because I am not perceived to be an American. I don't look like their misperception of what an America should look like. And I think we're going through that process. And I think the tension today, the division today, is, sort of the fear that this country is changing, that the demographics are changing, and that it doesn't look like their perception. And I think also to some degree, the sense of sharing power and not wanting to share power. And what I tell people is that whether you're coming in from Afghanistan, from China, from Mexico, from whatever part of the world, we are strengthening and enhancing this country. We're not detracting from it. People are not knocking on the door of Russia to go to Russia, or knocking on the door to go to China. They're coming on here. And we have an obligation. I tell people, everyone says, I have my rights. And yes, we have rights. But there are two R's, not one. It's rights and responsibilities, and civic responsibility. The responsibility to vote, the responsibility to engage in the life of the community. And I think we've been short on focusing on the responsibilities. And people just say, I have rights. Well, yeah, you have a right, but that right cannot be exercised fully if you don't do the responsibilities that go with it. And I think that, that's something that I've worked very hard on, sort of kind of saying to people, look, I'm an immigrant. I wasn't born here. I value what the Constitution says, and I believe it. I drank the Kool-Aid. My work reflects that I drank the Kool-Aid. But we have to invest in it. And right now, more than anything, we need to reinvest and recommit to our democracy, and to really deal with the difficult issues of, the transformation of this country. And I think that more and more people need to focus on that transformation.
Well, I think it's important. And one of the things, we talked about arts and culture and the importance of that, and history as well. We don't know the history, and the history of our Latino indigenous presence in the United States has never been accurately reported. It's not told that when California was going to become a state after the Manifest Destiny and after the Mexican-American War, it was the Mexicano Californios who prevented California from becoming a slave state. That's not in our history books. And so there are many things that have gone on politically that have been kept from the general public, and they don't know these contributions. So one of the things, and one of the reasons I'm bringing all of you luminaries back and moving Freeholders forward, and probably will do another edition of it, is to share this history and the culture, because we need to know it ourselves. We're not taught in school, so we have to read it ourselves to discover it. And we have a program where there's going to be ethnic studies is going to be a requirement for graduation in another 2 years from last October's, which is very important, so that we learn our full history so that we can avoid the mistakes of the past. I think it's very important.
And actually, I think it's happening sort of to some degree. I live in Pasadena, California. Well, in this community of Pasadena, next to the next city, which is Glendale, mm-hmm. I know April 24th is a very important date. It's because it's the genocide of, that happened in Armenia.
Yes.
And the Armenian community, we're teaching each other the values of culture, of different cultures, of what's important. That's not detracting from us, it's adding to us. And I think, telling the history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, it happened. Okay, that's what history is. And understanding the context in which it happened, it's truth telling and moving forward. Because I think that, we have to have, I once gave a lecture about, sort of kind of the immigrant experience. And I said, being an American is a state of mind. It is a state of mind because it's not the way we look, because we look all sorts of shapes and size. I said, it's a state of mind in the belief of democracy, that we have self-government, believe in that entrepreneurship where we can achieve our dreams, where we have the freedoms, to achieve those things and collectively create a community. It's a state of mind. And what we need to do, because, demographics, you can't change, okay? This country is a multicultural country. And it's more evident in California and Texas and different parts. But that's where the country's going. Okay, there's no backtracking. So the question is, how do we tell the story so it could be inclusive of everyone, where we value everybody's contribution, and we accept the fact that other communities changes and we change, and we contribute. And that the mixing, like I tell people, I'm a mutt. By being a Mexican, I'm a mutt. Part Indian, part Spanish, and it's not bad. That's just who I am, and I think we're all becoming mutts. So in America, that's who we are, and I think we need to accept it. So I really think that as a Latina, and actually as a Chicana, okay. Because that's who I identify.
Yeah,
I'm a Chicana, from East LA. We have so much, our community has so much to give. If we're given the opportunity and allowed to contribute. And I think that that's the message that I want to give to people. And I think any community can say the same thing. If we're valued and we're included. And the new lingo is belong. That we belong. We're included. I see you. We are seen as contributors and not detractors, or farm workers, uneducated in the field. Well, yes, we are farm workers, and I was a farm worker myself. And to value those farm workers, because they're the ones that put the food on our table. So I'm optimistic, and I guess by the nature of who I am, I've always been optimistic. And I think, that we're going to make progress. But I think we can only,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I said, but only if we recognize that we have work to do.
Well, there's much work to do, and you're now the president and CEO of the California Community Foundation, which is doing important work to improve the lives of marginalized communities. What are the priorities coming up in the organization in terms of serving all the health and education and other lack of opportunity needs in these communities?
Well, actually, you just named it. I mean, our focus is health, particularly substance abuse and mental health. Our focus is education. Without an education, you're not going to be a contributing member of society. Our focus is housing. We have a terrible homeless population. Because we are an immigrant community, immigration is really important. And I'm not talking just Latino. Every community in the world is represented in Southern California. So that's a focus of us. And civic leadership, engaging people in the process of civic leadership. And the interesting thing about philanthropy, MALDEF was a vehicle for social change and movement. And the tools were litigation, public policy, advocacy. CCF is a tool. And the tool is money. and how, and how you spend that money, how you invest that money. You have to be careful. Fiduciaries is so important. And our focus is to invest it in the people of Los Angeles County and to improve the quality of life. And everyone's a philanthropist. And that's what I want to end up on this one. The message is we're all philanthropists. Whether you're a day worker and you go to church and you put $1 in the basket, or whether you're a multi-billionaire and you provide funds for education, we're all philanthropists, and we all have an obligation to share for the common good.
Well, it's important to do that sharing. What do you see in terms of the divisions that are going on in this country and the abrogation of women's human rights in terms of the reversal of Roe versus Wade? And then on the other hand, telling people that women that they have to have children. There's, it's a crazy hypocritical construct that's going on right now. How do we move through this? How do we make the changes that need to be made to give people their full due and rights and opportunities in this country, and to be able to control their own bodies and their own destinies?
We're making progress, notwithstanding the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Once you're given a taste of freedom and choice, you can't take it away, because once again, it's a state of mind. They're not going to take it away. And science, is going to move forward. I mean, there was a news this week that there's going to be a pill that's going to be given, in the drugstores to women. The thing is that the issue of women and reproductive rights, we're not chattels anymore, and we will not be chattels anymore. We don't belong to anyone. We belong to ourselves. And the empowerment, look what's happened in Iran. What's happening with, it's the sense of the old wanting to control the lives of others. And that ship has sailed. It might have slowed, but that ship has sailed. My daughter, are you kidding? She is not going to allow that to happen. And my nieces, and, they're not going to allow that to happen. So I think that, evolution sometimes moves really fast and then it stops or slows. I think, we are kind of in what I call strategizing phase, but we ain't going back. And I think that, the issue of control of your body is so central to women's progress that we need to really figure out how we move forward. And I think that our biggest ally is science. And that's how we're going to move forward, and we're not going to move back. I think that, I tell people, choice is just that choice, either choice to bear children or choice not to bear children. It's not that everyone for choice is is going to go get an abortion. It's that we want to control our bodies, and we want to control our bodies because we want to control our destiny, because it's all about our ability, to control our destiny and be what we want to be, and use the God-given talents that the Lord gave us.
There's much to be done. I like to do intention setting at the end of the year, to frame the coming year. Do you set intentions, and what are your intentions for this coming year?
Actually, my intentions are to spend more time, with my granddaughters, my grandchildren, to kind of face myself into now giving more of my attention to my family, to my siblings, to my nieces and nephews. And that's what I want to do. And then, the other thing too is, from a leadership perspective, it's time for the younger generation to come in and to blossom and be there. And I think that, we can contribute in so many different ways, as you know, Yolanda. you know, we can be active and do different things in, you know, like I said, we can have it all, but in different phases of our lives. So my intention is to spend more time with family, with friends. I talked to my good friend Gloria Molina yesterday, you know, just to connect, you know, on a very personal level to the people that, you know, that are close to me. And you know, to sort of kind of cut down on the professional, and give room for others to come in.
Well, that mentorship that you provided in the past, and I'm sure that you will continue to provide ongoing, is very, very important. And I want to thank you for your decades of commitment. We need more advocates like you, Antonia, who are committed to change, who are willing to do the work, who have the character qualities that you do, who have the commitment to serve that you do. And I think that idea of servant leadership is something that we have to really promote and encourage, you know, in our young people, and take back, you know, the democratic principles. Really take to heart those democratic principles. You know, it's critical. We're in a very important transition stage, I think. But I want to thank you very much for joining me today. It's great to see you and to hear that you're well. And thank you so much. And I want to talk to, yeah, thank you. And to the audience, be sure you tune in next month for another edition of Yolanda Nava, Do You See What I See? And again, it's the end of the year. It's still the beginning. You still have time to set those intentions. Think about what you really want your life to be. Think about it. Give it some time. And then set your intentions. Write them down and work with them. Get to work on them and shape your year. Commit yourself to some degree of service in your community. And have a great life and year. Happy New Year, 2023.